All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And we will start off with comments from President of Baseball Operations, Chris Young.
Yeah, thanks, Rich, and good morning, everybody. Appreciate everyone coming out this Friday morning for an end-of-the-year recap. I'd like to start by thanking our fans. It always starts with our fans, and I can't say enough about the support we received this year. Just fans excited about our team, being grateful for playing meaningful baseball in early September, and hearing that feedback is motivating. We didn't reach expectations, and certainly not to the level that our fans deserve. That said, our fan base is tremendous, and this was a unique year with more fans having access to our games than a long time through Rangers Sports Network and Victory Plus. And I think this is an exciting time for our fans as well, because that's only going to continue. And so really, really grateful to our fan base, and looking forward to remedying some of the things that didn't quite get us to where we wanted to go this year. As I've said before, our fans deserve a winning team, and that's our intent to give them one. So, in a year where there were shortcomings, and ultimately we're here talking today about the season instead of playing playoff games, I don't want to gloss over the positives that happened. And it started really with our pitching. And this season was a year in which the Rangers had never experienced in terms of leading several significant categories statistically in pitching. And I think that's a tremendous accomplishment. I think it says a ton about the pitchers that we had on this team, the starting pitchers, Jacob deGrom, Nathan Eovaldi, Jack Leiter, Patrick Corbin, and others, our bullpen, and really about our pitching coaches and the way they work together, the internal development from PD, and preparing some of our young guys to come up and have success, and just the camaraderie and chemistry that these guys had, and the pride they took in going out day in, day out and competing. And I really, it's such a highlight as you look at the season, and I don't want to go today without really focusing, at least to some extent, on that. Likewise, our defense. Part of our pitcher's success was our defense, and in spite of our offensive struggles, I commend our position players for the way they defended this year. They never took their at-bats out into the field. They gave us a chance. In fact, we were a record-setting defensive team in terms of plays converted to outs, and really is remarkable to see those two things, a historic pitching performance and tremendous defense. They're correlated, they go hand in hand, but it is a complete team effort to accomplish those things. So obviously there was some lowlights as well, and I think it started with offensive underperformance and injuries, and I think those two things alone were really the main factors in us not reaching our goals of making the playoffs. And the injuries are a part of the game. We understand that. The offensive underperformance is something that we have to correct moving forward. It's really 2 years in a row where we haven't performed to expectations offensively. There were changes that were made in season to try to help push us forward. I think those changes had a positive impact in time, but it didn't happen immediately. And I am excited that now moving forward, that we can continue to stay on top of some of the things that we saw worked, and emphasize those, and make sure that we get the best out of our players moving forward and put them in positions to succeed. But there's no denying that just the offensive underperformance and combined with the injuries, we came up short, and it was disappointing in a year where we played such great defense and pitched so well. So moving ahead to 2026, we have a lot of work to do. There's a lot, and it starts with the manager search. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention just how grateful we are to Bruce Bochy and everything that he's meant to our organization. He came here to win a World Series, and he accomplished that year one. And he will forever be a legend in Texas Rangers history. And really, really grateful for all he's given and meant to this organization, to our fan base. It's been a joy for me to work with him, and we are hopeful he'll remain in the organization. However, I'm guessing he's going to have good options. So, internally, we're turning to our manager search. We have a lead candidate internally that we're focused on. I really can't elaborate beyond that in terms of where we are. That hopefully will materialize, and we'll have updates for you in the coming days. The coaching staff, I commend our coaching staff. These guys showed up to work every single day and gave a tremendous effort. They it's really hard when the team struggles or they don't live up to the expectations. And these guys came in and they worked, they cared, they were committed, and they did a great job. And while we have a number of coaches whose contracts are expiring, we're going to figure out the manager first, and at which point we will turn to the coaches. But I do say that everybody is in good standing. And, our hope is that a number of them will be back, if not all of them. It's still to be determined. So lastly, as we look to 2026, we came up short of our goals this year, but there is a great core in place. And while we may have some payroll reduction this year in 2026, our expectation is to win. And we believe that we have a core group of players in place that we can build around that will continue to win. Our player development system has done a very good job of graduating several players to the big leagues and will continue to graduate players to the big leagues as required. And so the health of the organization is strong. I really feel good about where we are, and I'm very optimistic that we're going to get back to winning baseball next year. And at this point, hopefully, we're playing playoff games instead of having end-of-the-season press conferences. So that's it for an opening statement. I'm going to turn it over to Ross to give a quick medical update on several of the guys that had end-of-the-season injuries, and from there, we'll answer questions.
Yeah, thank you, CY. Good morning, everyone. I'll just hit high level here. If there's any follow-up needed, please let us know. But Corey Seager continues his recovery from his appendectomy surgery. He's doing well. We expect a very normal offseason for him as we move forward here. Marcus Semien continues to recover from his foot. He's in a great spot. He should have a very normal offseason here starting soon. Wyatt with his oblique, he's in a good spot as well. It's just a rest and recovery injury there that should be very normal for him this offseason as he continues to progress forward. Jake Berger had successful surgery on his wrist on Monday out in Nashville. That's about a 6 to 8 week downtime before he recovers and returns, and he should have a very normal hitting progression and off-season progression after that. Evan Carter with his wrist fracture is doing well. He's about 90% healed, close to 100%. That should be a very normal hitting progression and off-season as well. On the pitching side, Nate Eovaldi's doing well with his shoulder recovery. Should be normal throwing off-season program for him. He is going to visit a physician in Phoenix next week and have an examination for a sports hernia. Potentially, we don't know yet, but upon examination, we'll have a determination whether or not he needs that surgery. Cody Bradford is doing excellent. We're expecting a full participant come spring training. Timeline to be determined as he continues his recovery there. Cole Winn doing well with his shoulder recovery. It should be just normal rest and a typical offseason for him. Kamar Rocker's in a great spot as well. Came back there at the end of the year. We're going to continue to work on some of these delivery adjustments that we've talked about, but he should be in a very good spot as well. And that's the bulk of it. If there are any additional questions, we're happy to answer, but to give a high-level update there.
All right, we'll open it up. Anybody for the first question?
Chris, in relation to the managerial search, and I understand you're limited in what you can say, I wanted to get a couple technical things, make sure I understand. Is Skip Schumacher currently under contract to the Rangers, or
Yes.
does that expire with the end of the season?
It expires at the conclusion of our contract cycle, which is the end of October.
So have any teams requested permission to talk with him? Without going into specifics, I know.
Yeah, I can't comment on that, Evan. Yeah.
Have you granted permission to anybody?
No.
You've not granted permission?
That would suggest that teams have reached out. I told you I can't answer that.
Okay.
Yeah.
In regards to the process of hiring a manager, it seems like I don't want to overestimate anything, but it seems like it's a pretty clean situation. You have a guy there that you said is an internal lead candidate. What are the other hurdles to being able to get something done there?
Well, it's just as it relates to internal candidates, just one, making sure that we, as a front office, sit down and have time to define our criteria, to assess, review, and understand what we think is most important moving forward, which we've had a good week to do. We've had a lot of great discussions and meetings, and so that's a starting point internally, what we have to do. And then from there, making sure that we're all on the same page, that there's 100% alignment, that there while internal candidates have been here and had exposure to everybody, it's a little bit different when you kind of formalize things or sit down in a room and talk about specifics. And so that's part of the process. And it's been a very good process thus far. I think there's been a lot of great questions asked and a lot of things that we've uncovered and discussed. And the more you can do on the front end, the easier it makes it moving forward in terms of alignment and understanding as to what the expectations are for both parties.
And would you consider that you've done any formal interview, that you've begun the formal interview process to this point?
Yes.
Okay. You can't acknowledge which candidates you formally interviewed?
The internal ones.
Okay. All right.
Are there external candidates?
At this point, we haven't focused there yet. Our hope is that we don't have to, but no at this point.
On Monday night, when you mentioned the reduction of payroll and going younger, how does going younger look like in your mind?
Well, to be determined. As you go around the field, obviously, I'd consider Wyatt Young, Evan Carter. We saw great things from Osuna. Jake Berger, still arbitration eligible, young player. Marcus Okori up the middle. JJ I'd consider on the younger side. In catching, Jonah is arbitration eligible. Higgy are obviously veterans, but the core of the team is still kind of under club control, and I think that's a great thing from a position player standpoint. And our expectation is that we're going to continue to graduate players from player development, and then also identify players that we want to trade for. We saw Michael Hellman make great contributions. Cody Freeman. These are all young players that came up and played meaningful games in September and helped us win. And I think it was a great lesson for all of us that having young players is a really good thing. And I think over the last couple seasons, we probably have gotten a little more veteran based, and these young guys can play meaningful roles on a winning team.
When we were here last year, you talked about the importance of your guys bouncing back and rebounding from that 2024 season. After 2 straight years now of some down seasons, does there need to be a more aggressive approach, or I don't know, how would you describe kind of that aspect of it?
Sean, it's a great question, because I think last year we wanted the bounce backs, but we continued with a similar offensive philosophy, and then we decided pretty early in the season that we needed to change the philosophy. And there's kind of a point in time this season, really June 1st, when our offensive metrics started to significantly improve, and we did see improvement. Unfortunately, it wasn't to the level that we could recover from, as April and May were not great, so actually bad. So, I think the big thing for us is determining philosophically what we want to see, and now having an off season where we can actually work with our hitters and stay on top of that and make sure that we continue a philosophy that we think is what's needed moving forward. And I think that alone will have an impact. And then some of it is individually for the players to continue to work hard and prioritize their health, their recovery, and make sure they're in a good position to come back and bounce back, that they're motivated, which all of us are motivated.
What were some of the offensive philosophy changes or changes you saw that you want to stay on top of?
Well, I think, one, strike zone control, there was improvement with that. There was our launch angles kind of lowered. We were more line drive focused. We tried to not hit as many pop-ups and make solid contact. And, there was no doubt a park effect that impacted us, but I think that normalized over the course of the season. And I think one of the challenges for us as a front office is to determine what types of players will have offensive success in this ballpark, and then build a roster accordingly. So, that was a big part of it. And then just the situational hitting aspect. We kind of got back to that, and I think saw some improvement over the course of the season, which improved our run production.
Getting back to the manager question, so you brought in Skip last year, and it seemed to be the heir apparent, and so he's had a year here to be here and see everything, and it seems to me like he wouldn't have a lot of questions at this point unless he had concerns about what's going to happen going forward. Do you understand what his questions are? Can you talk about that in any way?
Yeah, sort of broadly. I don't want to get in the specifics of it, but I think it's really about, the style, I think his questions have been about, what preferences on communication style and, day-to-day transactions and some of the logistics that come along with the front office manager relationship, some of the internal staff and how processes are going to work, game review, and stuff like that. We've had some personnel discussions. I mean, there's a lot of things that we talked about, but not specifically over the course of the year. But I think it's all great stuff, and I think it's exciting. I think we're all excited and motivated and energized by what we can accomplish, and understanding what a different voice may look like, and I think it'll be a good thing.
So you made the move fairly quickly about the manager. So obviously, because moves are getting made right now, does that give you some concern about the timing?
As it relates to what
Not having him committed to that yet so far. The longer this goes.
I'm not overly concerned at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you also talked about the fact that you want to see differences in the offense, but you just also expressed the fact that you like to have the same staff come back and that you have the core of the team back. That would suggest that what is exactly going to change the offense going forward?
Well, I said that we'll determine the staff once we get the manager. So I said they're all in good standing. Certainly, if the new manager determines that this is the right staff and philosophically there's alignment, we would welcome them back. That said, we want to set the manager up for success too. So I think that's an important component. And then the second piece, Kevin, is the philosophy did shift, and the players have not had an off season to adjust. I think they'll be asked to do different things in the off season in terms of their training, and not just simply working on one specific swing, but being able to do multiple things that may allow them to be more successful and contribute to a team type of approach that is necessary and that you're seeing these playoff teams do. So I think that's a big piece of it. And then spring training is a very critical time to implement the philosophy and get the collective buy-in. But anytime you make an in-season change, it's hard to see the improvement. And so I think that it's to your point, there will be personnel changes inevitably. There are going to be personnel changes. What those are, I can't say. We haven't had our roster discussions yet. We don't know what the market's going to be, and we don't have perfect clarity on where payroll is going to be. So there are a lot of things that will contribute to that. But I don't think we should expect the same exact personnel, but philosophically there will be differences, which I think will lead to improvement. And really, if you look at kind of that June 1st on date, there was, we were top 5 in the American League in runs scored from that point on. So there was improvement.
When do you assume you're going to have some clarity on the payroll?
I'm hopeful sooner rather than later. I don't. That'll be a sit down with ownership. But I will say, ownership has been unbelievably supportive, and the landscape in baseball has changed over the last several years as it relates to the RSN. And there's no doubt that many teams, us included, have been hit by that. I'm unbelievably optimistic about what this means long term. Like I said, more fans have been able to see our games and have access to our games than a long time, and I think that's a great thing. It's our job to put a winning team together, a winning product. Our payroll is going to be at a level that we are going to have no excuses whatsoever in terms of competing, and that's the part that probably disappoints me the most this season, is that ownership has given us the last 2 years the resources to win really a top payroll in the league, and we didn't accomplish that. And so, we've got to continue to make good decisions to be creative and use the payroll we have. But that's not, there are no excuses in terms of the payroll. Ownership's been great in giving us the money we need to win, and our expectation is that we're going to go find the right players to make that happen.
Chris, I know you already had an idea of what the issues were going in, but as you guys did your deep review and analysis of the season, was there anything that surprised you or caught you off guard when everybody got together?
It was both. It was a little bit bittersweet. It was painful to really see some of the things that we did so well, and then also there was optimism to know that we did so many things so well and came up short, but there's a lot to look forward to moving forward. And I think there's a lot of optimism I have that this is going to get correct quickly. I mean, we're not talking about a 20-game jump here to make the playoffs. I mean, we missed out, and really, I can't remember what did we lose down the stretch? 11 out of 12, or I don't know. You guys probably know better than I, but we lost. We kind of slumped to 81 wins, and 6-7 wins more, and over the course of the season, that's basically one per month. There's a lot of ways that we can correct this and get back to where we want to go quickly. And so I think in the end of the season review, we saw the positives and we saw the things that were real limitations that we have to fix. And so it's our job to go make that happen and enact change that's gonna push us forward.
There are guys in these special advisory roles that obviously have different levels of what they do. For those that want to know, what was Skip's involvement in the team on a daily basis and a weekly basis? How deep was he involved as opposed to just being a guy who showed up once every couple of weeks?
I'm going to let Ross answer a question here.
I mean, Skip was very involved. Obviously, he lives on the West Coast, but he'd come in quite frequently and attend games with us. And he'd also visit some of our affiliates in the minor leagues and interact with different players and staff there. So just having him around, and he'd spend time with us and many different folks in the front office. Add his perspective, his wisdom. He was around and available a lot. I think we probably talked to him every few days, if not daily, throughout the course of the year, and bounce ideas off him and get his perspective. So he was very involved in an advisory role this year.
For either one of you guys, Mike Maddox, you said that you want everybody to come back if it works. But I know when Mike came back here a couple of years ago, he was kind of on the fence about retiring. Has he given you an indication whether he wants to keep working or does he want to retire?
We haven't had that conversation yet. What Mike and Jordan Teagues and Dave Bush did this year was phenomenal, and I can't commend them enough. And we would be very open to having all three of those guys back again. We have to figure out the manager first. That's the manager pitch and coach relationship is critical, and we've got to figure that one out first. But I can't say enough about how much I've enjoyed working with Mike. I think I've complimented Mike in the past, and I don't know if I've done it publicly, but he does one of the things that I think is most important in a coach. And some coaches are really good on the technical side. Some coaches are better on the psychological side. But Mike, more than any other coach, one, holds players accountable, and two, he instills conviction, belief, and confidence in his guys. And to me, the game is really hard out there. And when you have a coach that can come out and say the right thing in the right moment, it takes a special person. So I look forward to having the conversation with Mike. We'll sit down with him when we get the manager hired and kind of see where his head is. And if it's, I say 100%, if it's not in the dugout, it's certainly we need him in the organization to help advance our pitching.
One other thing was you said a few words since Monday night, even before then, that are kind of buzzwords for fans, maybe red flags: financial uncertainty, payroll reduction. But you still very much envision a competitive team. Fans sometimes, I think, have a hard time negotiating that those two can coexist. What can you tell them or assure them that in spite of those things that you've thrown out, this can still be a competitive team? You plan on being a competitive team despite those terms that you've thrown out.
Yeah, Mac, it's a great question. I think first and foremost, I always want to be transparent with our fans, and so I think that's really critical that despite the payroll reduction, our payroll is going to be still at a level that is on par with teams that are in the playoffs and even higher than some of the teams in the playoffs. And so my very frank answer is if other organizations are doing it with less money, we can too. That's my expectation. I think we've got a tremendous front office. We've got a great core base of players, and it's not always, money spending doesn't necessarily translate to winning. And there's not, there is a correlation, but it's not always directly related. And so, whatever the payroll is, I have full confidence that we are going to have the ability to win, the expectation to win, and that when we win, ownership will expand to give us the needed pieces to finish off the team.
Chris and Ross, how do you evaluate the seasons of Jock Peterson and Adolis Garcia, two guys who are under contract for 2026, and how did you leave things with them?
Yeah, certainly, Jeff. down years for both guys. We can't run from it. Jock was a big free agent sign. We brought him in. We thought he was a perfect complement to what we needed in terms of a left-handed hitter that could handle fastballs, that could do damage, and the clubhouse leadership. And Jock got off to a terrible start, and I felt terrible for him because we know how badly he wanted to come in here and help guide this team and make everybody better. And when you get off to a cold start like that, it's hard to overcome. You look up every night and you see your batting average and your home runs and RBIs, and I think there is a little bit of a psychological component to that. He was putting pressure on himself, and it kind of spiraled. Right before he broke his hand, he was coming out of that. He was swinging the bat really, really well, and then he got hit by the pitch and fractured his hand and missed, I think, 6 or 7 or 8 weeks. I can't remember the exact time. And then from that point on, when he returned, it was a much better version of Jock. And so I really expect next year to see the more normal version of Jock. I think that this year was an anomaly, and we expect that Jock will bounce back and be a key contributor moving forward. And he does have, especially when he's going well, an infectious personality and a confidence that I think is needed in this clubhouse. And I think it'll be important that when Jock does perform, it's going to elevate everybody. And regarding Adolis, it's 2 years in a row where Adolis has struggled. There were some moments where he played well, but the consistency offensively wasn't there. He did play very good defense, and he left his at bats in the dugout and went out and played a strong right field, but. We do have decisions to make as to what the future looks like, and we haven't determined anything as it relates to anybody arbitration eligible, but the reality is we'll have to evaluate everything.
In regards to the manager, the voice, you've talked about wanting, what you haven't described exactly what it is you want in a voice from the manager as you go forward. What is it?
Well, I think first of all, I don't want anything I say in terms of what the voice is moving forward to be interpreted as a criticism looking backwards. That's not the case. Boch is unbelievable, and I just want to say that at the outset. So please don't misconstrue that by answering the question. I think the reality is, with a younger team, we're probably going to need a voice that's full of energy, that's hands-on, that's really working and coaching, during the day out on the field, and establishing relationships throughout the team. The internal management, being able to communicate with front office, with his coaches, and setting a clear expectation standards. And again, I just think that with the youth of next year's team, it's going to be really important. Development does not stop at the big league level. In fact, it's probably the most critical part of development. And you see a lot of players come up here and struggle initially, and it takes time to get them to the point where they can contribute. And so I think it's going to be really important for the next manager to have experience with younger players in terms of finishing off that development and establishing the relationships and making sure that they're hands-on coaching with those players.
And to follow up one thing on the payroll, I think you've got $140 million or so committed to 5 players. I think you guys finished right at 240 or 241 this year, whatever the final numbers be. So, are you saying that you're going to have less than $100 million to fill out that roster?
Well, I can say for certain we will be beneath the CBT. So, yes, yeah. What the final number is, we have not determined.
Do you feel like it makes it important that you potentially are open to moving one of your big contracts?
For the sake of just moving money?
Yeah. Well, to help with roster construction.
I think in terms of roster construction, our job is to make the best decisions possible to build the strongest roster to win championships, and so that's how we will approach it.
And then the last thing from what you mentioned earlier, you said that the park seemed to normalize. You guys both did. Ross, maybe you want to handle this one. I don't know, but the park effects seem to normalize. But what have you guys determined in relation to what CY said earlier about the type of hitter how does the profile for the type of hitter change going forward that may be attractive to you guys?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we're going to examine that a little bit deeper as we get into player personnel decisions. But I do think, if you look at the park factors over the last several years, slug has not been as fortuitous in our park as maybe some other elements. So just talking a little bit about maybe stable skills on base percentage, the ability to make contact, to execute situationally. I think those are going to be components that we look at going into this offseason. But we also have to be careful that the park factor has not been consistent in any one year over the last 5 years. So we don't want to over-index one way and have to make an adjustment in season. So we do need to do a deeper examination on this and have some thoughtful conversations. We have some insight over the last few years of what we think is going to play, but we need to spend more time on that going into this offseason. So.
Chris,
I can hear you.
okay. In free agency, how active might you be when it comes to trying to land a closer?
Yeah, to be determined. I think that'll be determined by what the needs are. And, we didn't have necessarily a bona fide closer this year, and certainly there were times where we lost games late in the game. But I think it's too early to determine that. Ideally, we would have a closer. We'd have an 8th inning, 7th inning, 6th inning leverage arms. We'd have 10 unbelievable starting pitchers. So we're going to have to pick and choose what we feel like are the most impactful positions to fill with the resources we have. But I do believe that we have some arms internally. I mean, what we saw from Robert Garcia at times this year, Jake Latz, Cole Winn. That was really exciting. I think we have some arms in player development that are coming that are going to be capable of pitching leverage in time. And then, what free agents can we bring back from this year's team? How do they fit in? And then what's available on the market? What's available via trade? There's a lot of work to do, and we're going to consider all aspects of how to build the best winning roster possible, and then how to continue to improve it over the course of the season too.
And I want to ask you a question. Somebody had called me, it was a major league longtime person, said, Newey, how did the Rangers find a better manager than Bruce Bochy with the resume and everything that he's had here? And then I also had referenced the excitement you had when you brought him in to manage this team.
Yeah, it's a great question. And Bruce Bochy is one of a kind. There's no doubt about it. I can't say how much I've loved working with him, being around him, learning from him, and competing with him. And so, the reality is he's one of a kind. So it's hard to replace somebody who's one of a kind. That said, I think that we're focused on finding the next manager who can, help us win the next championship. And so whether that's, filling Bruce Bochy's shoes, I don't view it that way. It's how we're going to push forward to get the best out of our group to win moving forward. And we're excited for that opportunity, and we're excited for the candidates that we have, and hopeful that we'll, in due time, have an announcement.
What are those qualities that you're looking for in a new manager? I know you already have stuff with Bruce Bochy and the stuff that he's done within the last 3 years, but what are those qualities that you're looking to add or to gain within a new manager?
Yeah, I kind of answered this a minute ago, but just the ability to bring in energy of positivity, communication style, standard of excellence, just the things that all Boch did in a lot of ways, and kind of enhance that voice and that presence in terms of the youth that we're going to have. And but yeah, it's very similar to what I said a minute ago, and we're working towards that.
And Ross, you talked about injuries earlier in the press conference. While unfortunate, that does mean that there's an opening for the players who do play those spots to get out there, who are hungry and who want to prove themselves. What have you seen in the mindset of these players going in these months going into June? And what have you seen as an overall team developing around those setbacks?
Yeah, I think we got to see a little bit of it. Unfortunate when players get injured. Certainly that creates opportunity for others, and some of our young players that were able to step up and fill those voids and do so admirably. We saw that in the end of the year, towards the end of the year, with some of these young players, Cody Freeman, Alejandro Osuna, Michael Hellman, just different players that get those opportunities in those moments. And it's encouraging to know that you're never going to finish a season start to finish with the 26 guys that you start with. It's important to have layers of depth in an organization. And we feel confident in how we're developing players and preparing them for this environment. And when the time calls and they're ready for those opportunities, we saw several of them capitalize on that this year. So it gives us confidence going into this season that we have, additional layers of depth and players that can contribute at this level and hopefully continue capitalizing on those opportunities.
Hey, Ross, there was a narrative around this team, especially later, that the chemistry in the clubhouse wasn't great, right? It wasn't all together. A, do you buy that? And B, can a leadership change affect that and make that better?
Not necessarily. I think in terms of your question, I think it's just a different style of player that we saw towards the end of the year, and I think we saw youthful energy and exuberance, and with any opportunity that presents itself, I think we were enlightened by the style of play that we saw. But in terms of the greater picture here, I don't prescribe to that notion.
So Chris, you've been talking a lot about a younger roster next year, and I know we saw that in August, September when guys were hurt. But if everybody's healthy, with the possible exception of right field, where are these young people going to be playing?
Yeah, that's Kevin, it's a great question. I hope we have to answer that. I really do. I mean, that's a great thing for us in terms of building organizational depth, and that's also creates competition, which is really good because competition drives performance. And when players don't perform, young players may end up in AAA, and AAA players may get opportunities. So I think that's something that's needed, and I think it's really, really good for the health of the organization. And our hope is that we do have that because we have organizational depth. And so, to be determined. This year was a long year with all the injuries, and some guys got opportunity because of the injuries, and some of those guys seized those opportunities. And so it was fun to see Michael Hellman, Cody Freeman, Osuna. It was really good to see those guys come up and show that they can contribute. Now they've put themselves in a position to earn spots out of spring training. And for some of the other guys on roster who have options, they can't quit performing. They have to continue to get better and perform because they're guys coming for their spots.
And also to the point, we saw the people that we saw. Is there any possibility for Sebastian Walcott to make a move next year?
I'm going to keep Ross from answering this because Ross is his biggest fan. With Sebastian, we want to make sure that we take the necessary developmental steps. He is a unique talent, and I don't want to rush him. The reality is there may be a time where he is ready next year, and there may be a time where he's close to ready, and we have to force the issue because he's the most talented player in the system. But the hope is that we can give him the time he needs to develop, and that he'll knock the door down when he's ready, and at that point we'll call him up. My hope is that it's next year because I think it would be great for our fans, and I think he would. When he does get here, he's going to help us win.
Backing up quickly to a question you answered a minute ago, and the danger will interpret something the wrong way. When you mentioned a bunch of names that helped internally, and in relation to the bullpen, you mentioned Latz. Do you consider Latz a reliever going forward, or are you leaning towards being a starter?
He's shown he can do both, and we have to determine where the best utilization of Jake is to help the team win. And the way he pitched down the stretch, one of the highlights for me this year was really down the stretch, seeing Jake Latz and Jack Leiter get starts in meaningful games, playoff type atmospheres, and going out and performing. And to me, it's still, that's probably what I miss the most about playing is those moments where you get to play in big games in front of big crowds late in September, and to see those guys take the ball and go out there and perform, it gives me great optimism that, for Jack, he's a bona fide starting pitcher. For Jake, he's shown he can pitch in the pen, he can start. And I think we're going to have to determine. There are a lot of components to it. There's a health component. There's a team component. How many starters do we have? We have a pretty good foundation next year with, on paper right now, Jacob deGrom, Nathan Eovaldi, Jack Leiter. We should have Cody Bradford back. We've got Jake Latz who can start, Kamar Rocker. We've got Jose Corniel we saw at the ends. We feel like we have, hopefully Winston Santos on the way and others in the system that are developing. So the starting pitching in the system and on the team is in a good spot. And, I have no doubt that if Jake, we determine the best spot for him is in the rotation, he would make our rotation better.
Again, it's a toss-up on who wants to grab this one, but what's your situation at catcher going into this winter?
Well, we have Higgy under contract. Obviously, we have a decision to make on Jonah. He's third-time ARB eligible, which we'll spend some time going through personnel decisions here in the short term. And then we'll also continue to pursue avenues via minor league free agency or additional areas to reinforce the group and come spring training. So it's still a determination that we need to make, but we're going to go through our roster and evaluate and figure out how we come out on that.
And then hopefully the last thing. We talked about offensive philosophy, right, and how that changed.
Yeah.
How do you guys, as you move forward, how do you distinguish between what was, you attribute to offensive philosophy is part of the responsibility for the lack of offense and potential talent or skill decline / regression?
It's a really good question, and I think I'm guessing you're asking as it relates to some of the older players. And the reality is that for like Adolis and Marcus, we saw flashes. For Marcus, it was more sustained. Marcus had a period where he was really, really good, and it looked like normal Marcus. And then, but the first 2 months were really tough. There was such a slow start there that the overall body of work doesn't really reflect well. But that said, you see these, this long sustained period. It was, I think, 6 or 7 weeks where he was really, really good. And that's the version of Marcus that we need. And so I think in terms of the age decline, he's playing a tremendous defense. His skill set still works there. You would naturally think it still works at the plate, but there are probably some mechanical changes that we are going to be required, maybe philosophically continuing to improve and change and making sure that we can get, that, we'll call it an 8-week period of Marcus over the course of 6 months. But I don't, as it relates to him, think there's a physical decline. I mean, Marcus works as hard as anybody at keeping his body in shape. He's so intent and in tune. And to actually, I think we've taken for granted over the last several years just the ability to have him in the lineup. And then finally, he comes out of a game with a foot injury, and you look up and you're like, oh, wow, it's weird not seeing Marcus in the lineup. And to think that he missed the rest of the season because of injury, we've taken that for granted. So I don't necessarily attribute to a physical decline. A physical decline, no doubt, starts to happen, but I think the best players adjust, and they make adjustments, and they change. And Marcus, I still think, is in a physical spot where he can make those adjustments and be a very, very good Major League player.
Russ, Chris, both you guys mentioned a park effect in terms of this roster's production. I'm assuming you're meaning batting, but in terms of this roster construction and batting production. I heard a guy say one time, it's never the ballpark, it's always the ball players. And it was probably, I think it might have been Johnny Oates, God rest his soul, who said that. But anyways, how much of this season, it wasn't about the park, it's more just about guys not having good years?
It's a great question, Mac, and that's something we have to determine. And I think there's some of both. The park effect is a hard one because we won at home. Actually, our road record was atrocious, and that's something we have to improve. So, we did score more runs on the road, but we didn't win on the road. So I think that's something for 2 years in a row we've underperformed on the road. So the park effect is a really hard one for me. Similar to the quote you said, I said it's not where you pitch, it's how you pitch. And so, it may be different for a hitter, but my mentality is, both teams are competing in the same environment, the same park. Now, in terms of if the park is playing a certain way over a period of time, we, of course, as a front office, need to examine that and construct our roster to give us an advantage in the building in which we're going to play, 81 of our games. So I think it's really important for us to understand that. But, I do believe that the talent on this roster, a lot of it was underperformance as much as it was, the park effect. I think that just some of them got off to slow starts. Hitting's contagious. We started to see them struggle collectively, and we also saw them come out of it collectively too. And then the last really 6 weeks, we had significant injuries, so it's really hard to determine. But that's one of the main questions we as a front office have to answer this offseason and understand, like, how does each member of the team fit in this ballpark? What is their trajectory moving forward? And what types of players do we need to surround this roster with to help them all succeed?
Piggybacking off the question about culture and Ross's answer, I mean, the clubhouse, quiet, even-keeled, however you want to describe it. As philosophies change and maybe directions change, does the personality, culture need to change at all? Or, how do you kind of view that heading forward?
It's a tough question to answer because, it's a similar personality and group that won the World Series in 2023. So, you can't say that was unsuccessful in terms of the personality or the style. I think the answer, Sean, is that, when you don't meet expectations collectively, we all have to change. We have to evolve as a front office. The staff, the manager, the staff has to change. The players have to change. And ultimately, I view this as, it's a recipe. We're baking a cake or whatever recipe it is, and each ingredient matters. And if you have too much of one and not enough of the other, or vice versa, the cake doesn't taste as well as it should, and the results aren't what they should be. And ultimately, we've got to, and naturally, every year the ingredients do change. And so naturally there is going to be change. There's going to be reflection, and there's certainly accountability amongst everybody in terms of what we have to do to get this right moving forward to win. Because, I think we all came into this season with expectations of competing for a division title and a playoff berth and a potential World Series championship. And to fall short of that is painful. So if we don't make changes and we don't reflect and we don't improve this, then we're not doing our jobs as an organization.
When does roster cleanup begin? Like putting the guys back on the 60 or off the 60 DIL and onto the 40 and then clearing 40-man spots? Is that imminent, or do you guys have a little time?
We have a little time. It's after the World Series. I know that, but we'll get you the exact date.
Okay, and then Ross, is there a need to try to beef up the farm system through trades this offseason, position player-wise maybe?
No, not necessarily, Jeff. I mean, I think our goal is to win at the major league level, and ideally we'd like to be able to be both near and far-sighted in that regard and be able to supplement the system further. But ultimately, with where we're at, our goal is to continue developing the players that we have and enhancing their progression throughout our system to put them in better position to contribute to our club. And ultimately, if those opportunities present themselves, we're going to explore them like any other opportunity. But I don't think that's a stated goal this offseason.
Do a couple more here.
Chris, toward the end of the season, Marcus made a comment about the makeup of the club and the clubhouse, and said he wanted to be surrounded by guys who were hungry to win. Did that comment give you any concern in any way, and what was your reaction to that?
Kevin, it's hard to judge. I don't have full context as to how the question was asked and what the response was. When you read the response, certainly you say, well, that's a little bit of an indictment. I don't think Marcus meant it that way at all. I think what Marcus is saying is that he came here to win, and Marcus does everything he can to win. He wants to win, and I believe that we have every player in that room feels the same. Guys do it in different ways, but ultimately I think what Marcus was expressing is really dissatisfaction with the results of the season and that we have to improve, and he has as much accountability in that as everybody else in that clubhouse, as everybody else in the coaches room, and as much as we do as a front office. So I try not to read too much into it. The part I like is that he's stating it takes hungry players to win, and I agree with him on that. And I do believe we have hungry players. I think it, and in the frustration of injuries and underperformance, I know where his heart is, and so I'm not overly concerned with the comments. But I do think collectively, it's everybody in this organization. We have to have accountability and reflect of how are we going to improve and how are we going to get better? And Marcus is a big part of that.
Chris, this is really a question just for you and how you go about your job. Obviously, right out of the gate, you win a championship. And Pat Riley once talked about in '85, he said the Lakers won a championship, but we weren't a championship organization. In your mind, is this a championship organization, and how do you try to get yourself back there from your perspective personally?
Yeah, Nui, the reality is that there's only one team that wins a championship year in, year out, and it's really hard to do, right? It's really hard, and I'm very proud of the health of this organization, of where we are. I'm so proud. First of all, the partnership with Ross has been phenomenal. It's our first year of this, and I really have enjoyed working with him and his insight and wisdom and everything he has added and taken off my plate. And collectively as a front office, I'm just so proud of the way we are operating. The results, we're measured by the results of the major league team. But throughout the entire organization, the culture, the coaches, the staff members, strength conditioning, medical, scouting departments, international, I just am very proud of where we are and how we're functioning. There's always room for improvement, but if you said that I think we're a desirable place to work, I think that we're doing things in a tremendous manner. I think we've seen some real improvements in areas, especially like with our pitching development, something the Rangers have never really been known for. I think we are in a spot where we have never been, and that's a function of everybody contributing. Do we need to improve in areas? No doubt about it, but every organization can say the same. And so while we're not winning a championship this year, I 100% believe we are a championship organization. So I'll stand by that.
And we'll end it there. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Cake talk got me really excited. I got really excited talking about cake.